Hey everybody, welcome back to the Noggin Notes podcast. I'm your host, Jake Wiskerson, and today I am interviewing a very good lifelong friend of mine and founder of Reno Dads, Mike McDowell. And I think you're really going to enjoy this because Mike gets a little vulnerable. He admitted to me after the podcast it was the first time he'd ever felt himself feel the way that he did in describing one of the people that Reno Dads has impacted. So that was a pretty cool moment. I thought it was very special, and I can attest through my own involvement with Reno Dads as well as through my own counseling practice that moments like that are few and far between. So cherish it. I hope that, Mike, you enjoy it. If you're listening to this back, I know I never listen to my own stuff again, but maybe you will. Just know that I'm proud of you. And I'm proud of what we're doing with Reno Dads to help bring the fatherhood community together. As always, the podcast is sponsored by Zephyr Wellness. It's my company that I co-own with my co-owner, Lindsay Bell, here in Northern Nevada, and also by Audible. And if you haven't checked out Audible, you really should. We have a deal working with them where you can go to audibletrial.com/nogginnotes and sign up for a free 30-day trial. And with that, you get a free audiobook download that you get to keep even if you cancel your subscription before the 30 days ends or at any time if you renew and realize that it's a great thing because you get to listen to great audio content and a completely unmatched inventory literally anywhere your device can go. So you can download that and bring it with you anywhere. If you realize that's for you and you continue the subscription, then great. You're just feeding your brain, which we advocate. So audibletrial.com/nogginnotes is where you're going to go for that. And download your free 30-day trial, get your free audiobook, and keep it even if you cancel. audibletrial.com/nogginnotes. Thank you again for downloading us and listening in, as we presume that you do regularly. Without any further delay, this is my interview with Mike McDowell from Reno Dads. Enjoy. Well, today we're talking with Mike McDowell of Reno Dads. Check out renodads.com, and we'll get more into the website and all that in a minute. Hello, Mike.
Hey, how are you?
I am fine. You look surprised. It's funny.
Well, it's funny, the pleasantries here because we've known each other for so long.
Yeah, no, it's it's also funny because this is an audio format, and so people can't see the visual. So it's like with the surprise, it's like, well, how long was he sitting there? And like, did you just shove the mic in his face?
He just walked up to me on the streets. This is how this is going.
Yeah. So what we wanted to discuss was Reno Dads and what you're trying to accomplish. I am a contributor to Reno Dads. I write articles. You founded the group with another fraternity brother of ours, David Bradfield. All three of us were in the Sigma Phi Epsilon fraternity at the University of Nevada together. Mm-hmm. We won't say how long ago because it makes us feel older than we look. Mm-hmm. But I will stop talking and let you explain what it is that we do and how we came into existence.
Yeah, and if your listeners hate concise stories, then they're going to love this because it's really a longer story of just sort of how we came to be. It wasn't as intentional as you may have hoped or thought it would be. Really, David and I were sitting around a table over at his house enjoying a little bourbon, and the kids were running around in the backyard and around the house just kind of loudly, and we're talking back and forth, and Dave's wife was contributing to Reno Moms, and they have a blog, and so we're like, why isn't there a dad's blog? Why isn't there a voice for dads in this community? Why isn't generally there a voice for dads, right, for that matter? And it wasn't that, poor men don't have a voice. It wasn't anything like that. It was like, well, I just don't ever hear about dads talking about fatherhood, and why don't we do that? We're already doing that around the table here, kind of talking about different stuff the kids were doing. And we thought, well, famous words, how hard could it be? So we thought...
Depends how well you want to do it.
Yeah, well, that's true. And so we thought, well, at minimum, we can put a site together and start to get some thoughts out and start to put some thoughts to, I was going to say ink, but virtual ink to pixels. And Dave and I aren't one to really drag our feet, so we just did it. And had to sort of figure out what Reno Dads was going to be along the way. We knew at minimum we wanted to have some place to sort of normalize speaking about fatherhood, and at maximum, change the world, of course. But if nothing else, we just figured if we can impact fatherhood in our corner of the world, in our community, and we're both big believers that we should give back to the community in which we live in, then maybe we're doing right.
What year was that?
It was almost 3 years ago now. So just that first quarter of 2017.
Well, I came on pretty early then, because I think my first articles were like April of 17. I didn't realize.
An early adopter.
Okay. Yeah, there we go.
Dave and I like to call ourselves founding fathers.
Yeah,
because why not pun if you can?
Sure. Well, and I just was an early investor, adopter, beta tester, and my stock has only risen since then, I'm sure.
Yep, we appreciate that.
How long ahead of Reno Dads did Reno Moms precede us? Do you know?
I think 5 years or so.
They've been around a while.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic I think we've already found is that moms, and I'm generalizing here, but moms tend to gravitate toward community and identifying with their role as a parent, and dads don't tend to look for that as willingly.
Like we isolate?
Yeah.
And it's weird because it seems like you see dads doing things like coaching the kids' teams and playing in their own softball leagues and that kind of thing. So those look like communal events, but we fail to engage each other.
Yeah, exactly. We don't talk about it as often as I've started to discover moms do. And just in the last 3 years, obviously I was a parent. I've been a parent for a parent and a parent. I can't get out of the puns, but I've been a parent for my oldest is 10 years old. And only until I started Reno Dads with Dave did I start to pay attention more to dads talking to moms talking, the way they talk about parenthood, the way they identify themselves as like that's part of their identity is mom or dad. And dads just don't. And so we thought, is it just because it's not normal to, or is it weird to? Do we not like it? But then the more we started to talk to dads about being a father, they light up about it. They light up just as much as a mom lights up about it, and they care about it just as much. But for some reason, we don't talk about it. You
and I've never really had this conversation. So if you don't mind, I want to birdwalk this a little bit.
All right.
The concept of the psychology behind why that is the case. And we could go back to, traditional roles in the home and dads, being at work and provider and all that stuff instead of like caregiver. Yeah. And maybe that feeds in. But what are you seeing? What's your opinions? Have you formed any?
I honestly don't know. It's been really fascinating as we've kind of gone along the way to figure out why that was. And I think you're onto something there with saying some of these traditional roles. Many of us learn how to be a parent from our parents or watching other parents or role models. I mean, we didn't get handed a how-to guide when we left the hospital.
That's the punchline, right? That's nobody gets a handbook.
Yeah. So you figure how do you learn how to do it? And certainly we stumble through a lot of it, moms and dads alike. But you look to your own parent's role in your family, I think, to inform you. And whether that's inform you in terms of I want to do what my dad did, or I want to do it very differently than my dad did, or I want to sort of cherry pick things I liked and didn't like. And I think, even the past, let's just say, century, the role has very much been, as you identified, that moms are nurturing the family, staying at home. Dads were at work and viewed their identity as, I do this for a living. And yeah, I have kids, but that's not part of my identity. So why, when I get around with my buddies, would I talk about that?
Right. And then, of course, you got the male bravado that overshadows all that, where you don't want to be vulnerable in front of your buddies. So even if your kids are struggling at home or you're struggling with your kids, you're not going to bring that up at the bowling league because of fear of, being mocked or ridiculed or being too soft. And again, I'm speaking generic historical stereotypes, right?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And, when we started Reno Dads, some of the interesting feedback I got was, you're trying to turn dads into moms. And I thought, first of all,
in a condescending way?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, well, that's interesting. What does that even mean? But two, no, I don't think it's about that. I think it's about celebrating fatherhood. I think it's about celebrating the differences and just what is that journey like, and having an opportunity to talk about that journey, I think is therapeutic.
Yeah, well, and even as a clinician, my ears are hearing that very defensive response of like you're trying to turn dads into moms. And why do we get defensive? Well, because something's being examined that we don't necessarily want to look at. And maybe that thing that we didn't want to look at or those people didn't want to examine was the vulnerability of not having a defined role that now that Reno Dads exists was bringing some light to.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, now you got to define it. And well, I don't want to look there because I might be deficient. Yeah. And if I'm deficient, what does that mean? And I could see that.
What's interesting that I found too is the dads are still tough to engage, and what we've made a really conscious effort of with Reno Dads to start with is we didn't want to be an advice column. We didn't want to be a place to say, here's how to be a dad, here's how to be the best dad, because what do we know, first of all? Yeah. It was really just a sharing of the journey. But dads, we find, if I look at the articles that people are reading the most on our site, they're not looking for advice. They're not seeking out advice. They're not, traditionally they're not buying the what to expect when you're expecting book and reading that sort of thing. And maybe it is a vulnerability thing. Maybe it is the idea that I don't know what I'm doing here and not wanting to admit that to a buddy or anybody for that matter. You
are the metrics guy. What are and I don't know, what are people reading? Because sometimes we have little internal bragging contests among the authors, but what are the themes that you're seeing that people are digesting?
Well, recently stuff that is hyper-localized, so if it's guides about things that are going on, so some of Dave's recent sports guides, so guide to soccer in Reno Sparks, Carson City, guide to, so some of those like really hyper localized, where do I find, I'm getting my kid into sports, I don't know what to get him into. And then I'd say the stuff that really resonates too are just storytelling. So we have Scott, who's a contributor and had told this story about this dad who had lost his son and wife to cancer within the same year or same number of months.
Wow.
And I think when I look at the analytics for what people are the most interested in, the personal stories shine. And I think it is a matter of it. What it tells me is that there's a little bit of desire to step into somebody else's life and go, boy, I don't even know what that would be like. I don't even know what that experience would be like. What if my child was diagnosed with cancer? Like, what would that be like? What would that feel like? And so I think those sort of stories appeal because we don't know how to prepare for that, and I think dads tend to want to be prepared and protect. There's some instinct there, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so, whether they admit it or not, they're looking for that kind of content to, I think, just to, I don't know, maybe it's just to again have a shared experience with another dad.
Yeah, and I'm thinking why are those so popular? Shared experience for sure, and we know through some anthropological theory that human beings continued to exist beyond some of our other hominid brethren because we hung together. The Homo sapiens hung together in tribes, and those tribes connected in community. And so, what does a shared experience do? It creates community, it creates commonality, and what have males in Western civilization been largely dissuaded from doing? Sharing things with each other. So if you can do it more or less anonymously on a forum that doesn't require face-to-face interaction, maybe that fills that need somehow, that very deep biological evolutionary need to connect. And also it does give wisdom and insight, right? So who knows what people are going through, but if we can find an analogous comparison that makes us somewhat relate to somebody else, and we go, well, maybe I'm not alone in the world, right? Somebody else is feeling this too.
Yeah, that's just it. And again, Dave and I didn't set out honestly to try to have a social change here. We just thought it felt right to have a forum and a way to just share an experience, and really we didn't think it would have. We've had really positive feedback. We haven't expected that kind of a response from the community, and wow, thank you for talking about this. I can't believe you're leading the charge. And we just go, man, I just
didn't know I was leading a charge.
No, yeah, exactly. We just thought we're just sort of filling a gap that we weren't even sure anybody else thought existed, to be honest.
So what is the most of the content that's made up? Because as the counselor guy, I write a lot about emotions and emotional functioning. It's more instructional. It's not super storytelling. You mentioned the storytelling. You mentioned guides. What else do we have? And then what's being requested?
Oh boy, it's really all over the map. So what we have about a dozen local dads that contribute to at least our content